How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.
Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Tuesday, July the 14th. Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister for 2 hours longer than expected because of the World Cup. His trip to the palace on Monday has been pushed back until mid-morning, regardless of whether England make the final, just in case he has to attend in New Jersey and then has to hot foot back to the UK afterwards. According to The Guardian, the logistics of the original slot had made the transatlantic flight impractical. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. Yes, Andy Burnham, the substitute brought onto the Labour pitch to shoot and hopefully score, has been reassuring Labour MPs that he will continue to ensure that his party is a broad church where cabinet appointments will be made reflecting contribution, experience and commitment. Sounds like Thomas Tuchel giving a pep talk there. So it is a bit of code, I think, Sam, for having familiar faces in the big roles in some constellation. But what is the formation? Nerves are jangling across the Labour Party, even among those already in cabinet, about who's likely to remain in government and those who don't know if they will have a job in a week today.
We'll have more on that in a moment. Everybody and everything is holding their breath, including the polls. This week's YouGov Sky Times poll has Reform UK on 24, down 1, Conservatives on 19, down 2, Labour also on 19, down 1, Greens on 15, up 2, and Lib Dems on 13, up 1. So no Labour bounce in anticipation of Andy Burnham, no Reform collapse after everything that's been going on there. We're all just watching and waiting. And you were probably at the best place to be yesterday outside of that PLP meeting, which was the Tony Blair Institute Summer Party with the big man himself, which is the former rather than the next Prime Minister. Did Andy Burnham get the blessing of Mr. Tony?
Well, Andy Burnham got a bit of a benediction from Tony Blair, but also a warning, I thought. He was in conversation with Matt Ford, the podcaster and comedian, on stage. And Tony Blair's message, looking back at how he had felt coming into office in 1997, was don't expect to be popular. And he gave Burnham this compliment, saying, Andy's got a very sure political touch. He's genuinely a people person. Politicians have to pretend to be interested in people. But, very Mr. Tony, you do come across politicians who love humanity in general a bit more. And that was a kind of nice way of describing Burnham's rather sunnier default there, perhaps, than Keir Starmer. But he said, don't expect this to last. It won't carry you through. You got to know what you're trying to do and get it across very early and follow it up. And the other person I noticed applauding that very, very strongly and smiling at that thought was Rishi Sunak.
Yes, he never looked like he enjoyed his time in number 10. It's interesting what Tony Blair's saying about Andy Burnham, because actually that reminds me of some of the very early criticisms of Tony Blair himself, perhaps before he got into Downing Street and in those early years of New Labour, where the caricature of him was of a Bambi and a sort of people pleaser. But of course, he then went on to be somebody who picked a side, in some cases, to the dismay of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer, however, his time is almost up, yet he still won't be meeting his own cabinet this morning, despite that being the normal time for a cabinet meeting, because he's chosen instead to stay in France for a second day and watch the Bastille Day parade. I hear cabinet has been pushed back to, I think, tomorrow afternoon. I do wonder, Anne, how many days of his final week in office will be spent out of the country, finishing as he continued through much of the premiership. So we're at 2 already. He will be back this afternoon, however, to front the remaining common stages of the Hillsborough Law, public accountability bill to its friends, a Burnham-friendly bill that creates a legal duty for public officials to tell the truth after it appears a settlement was imposed on the security services, with an exemption for the heads of security services dropped. Listeners to this podcast will know that has been a bone of huge contention across the Labour Party, the Hillsborough law. So Keir Starmer picking and choosing his activities carefully in his final hours.
Yes, I hear it was Lord Hermer who negotiated that deal with the security services there. I don't think they're absolutely thrilled about the protection that it affords them, Sam, if they have to give evidence and feel that they need to protect their sources if there's any accusation of wrongdoing in public office. But basically, the government keen to push through on the Hillsborough bill. Now, Playbook also talking about Keir Starmer spending time out of the country. At least he can't be so criticised for Keir Miles when he's in the departure lounge. Playbook was hearing that Emmanuel Macron introduced a football match-style minutes-long applause at the top of the Coalition of the Willing meeting on Monday in Paris, thanking Starmer for what he'd done for the Coalition of the Willing in Ukraine and saying that he had played a historic role. And Volodymyr Zelensky described Starmer as a friend and a great PM and a great man. So yay, Keir, big in Ukraine. Does pose a question, doesn't it? Will Burnham have as much chemistry with the key players there? And in terms of the international scene, the Coalition of the Willing, etc. And it's a useful legacy building for Starmer on the global jobs market. There are still those close to the outgoing PM who think that he should be active in foreign affairs in the next era. But frankly, Sam, I do think the news that Ollie Robbins, the ousted permanent secretary at the Foreign Office over the whole Peter Mandelson mess, is seeking judicial review against Starmer means that is too much of a spanner in the works, I think, for Starmer playing any role that interfaces with the Foreign Office. That's quite a big deal because Ollie Robbins has not just gone for unfair dismissal, he's gone for the full judicial big enchilada of a review.
I do wonder whether that means that it's just much less likely now that Ollie Robbins comes back into government. If he's pressing the big button of judicial review, it's just harder to segue effortlessly in just a few days' time, as some reports had suggested he might. Yes, so Keir Starmer abroad for a few more hours. Easier, I think, than looking Shabana Mahmood in the eye around the cabinet table. I think her and Ed Miliband are the two people that Keir Starmer's team find the sort of hardest to deal with after everything because of perceived disloyalty. One interesting tidbit from the last couple of weeks, Anne, shortly after the kind of formal defenestration of Keir Starmer, there was a PMQs where Kemi Badenoch was taunting Keir Starmer about his own cabinet members. And if you listen back carefully, she reels off names of cabinet ministers who betrayed him. And look closely, you'll notice that he doesn't jump to the defence of Ed Miliband. He defends Rachel Reeves, for instance, absolutely staunchly. But if the Tory leader mentions the name of the energy secretary, I think you'll see a gap in the case for the defence for him, which I think reflects his thinking that he's really not in the mood to defend a guy who basically sort of got him into politics, but right now is seen as somebody who betrayed him and is hoping for a big win in the Burnham cabinet when we finally know who's who.
Intriguing. And Rachel Reeves making her last big outing as Chancellor tonight at the Mansion House speech, firmly engaged in her own legacy building and telling that business audience that Britain has a stronger economy as a result of the government rejecting a failed status quo. Although that sounds a bit like a campaign speech. I'm not sure how that will go down with the city folk. She will want to say that her role that she has played in creating what she calls an active and strategic state, stepping in, has laid the foundations for future success. And that's sounding quite in tune with Manchesterism and that more activist state thinking around Andy Burnham. That may also be something of a job application, though which job at the moment, as we pointed out, is somewhat open. Some people even mooting that Rachel Reeves could take another position, like Energy Secretary. Let's see what happens there. I bumped into quite a lot of the advisors that out and about last night. It was just a reminder that there is this whole penumbra of economic advice that was built up as Keir Starmer sought to balance out the Treasury in number 11, Sam, including Minu Shafak, the economist, who's all waiting to hear their fates, because her tenure as chief advisor in number 10, directly to Starmer, didn't actually turn out to last that long. Now we know that Burnham is taking different streams of counsel. Miata Fanbula, principally there on the macroeconomic picture at home, Jim O'Neill on the global economy. So some of those people are going to find themselves, I think, in receipt of a polite thank you letter.
Yeah, we've got a little bit more on number 10 jobs at the moment, but just to stick on the economic picture, in her speech, Rachel Reeves will sort of point out the positives. That's no surprise. This is a legacy exercise, but it is true that Andy Burnham still inherits a challenging picture. So Rachel Reeves will sort of make a lot of the fact that Britain had the fastest economic growth in the G7 at the start of the year. But of course, you did get, UK GDP slipping back in April because of the international picture. And the big thing that Andy Burnham's sort of promising to tackle the cost of living crisis, well, people do feel squeezed. Rachel Reeves will correctly say tonight that wages are up too, but when you look at the actual numbers, it's only 0.1% after inflation in the 3 months to May, depending on which inflation measure you use. So yes, the economy is it does have some positive sort of metrics about it, but on some of the key measures, it's slightly less rosy than the picture that will be painted at Mansion House.
And no doubt global conditions have made the government's job a lot harder on that front. There was a glimpse of a brighter future with the peace deal in Iran and the reopening of the Straits of Hormuz, but foreshadowing the kind of economic and major diplomatic uncertainty that Andy Burnham will have to deal with. The US is back to pounding Iran with missiles. American military are now going to resume a blockade of the Straits and impose a 20% charge, which Britain has argued against. And the price of oil is back at $85 a barrel. So countries simply can't hijack these kinds of international transit routes and unilaterally apply tolls, said Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, back in April. They can't do it by the laws of the sea and UN arrangements. True that, but Donald Trump doesn't seem to much care about those things.
No, and this all lands on the lap of Andy Burnham. All of the sliding backwards over the last 4 days when it comes to Iran and the peace deal that Donald Trump signed a couple of weeks ago, falling apart, is that the more Andy Burnham hitches himself to a cost of living promises, the more difficult he's going to make his own life. Just in the last few days, it looks as if there will be yet more interest rate rises by the end of the year, for instance, because of what's been going on in the Middle East. This is the kind of reason why figures like George Osborne, the ex-Tory Chancellor, say you are mad, be it on the Tory side, Rishi Sunak, or on the Labour side, Keir Starmer, to hitch your wagon to cost of living, because so much of the cost of living is outside your control. Things like interest rates, which is the whim of the global economy, and figures like Donald Trump do not do it. Yet we appear to be about to do that again with Andy Burnham. There were some reports over the weekend that he wants to go big on this theme, perhaps even in the first fortnight. But he would need to raise money in order to do something meaningful. Otherwise, he'd have an unfunded early spending spree, and it's just not at all clear that the markets would particularly love that. But helping low earners or doing something on business rates for pubs, all of that is expensive. And without an Office of Budget Responsibility assessment, his options are limited. So that all, risks a little bit of disappointment. Perhaps there could be an early decision also on drilling in the North Sea, particularly if he ends up putting Ed Miliband in the chancellor role, although I hear that's ever so slightly less likely. But if he does do something, Andy Burnham, on drilling in the North Sea, it emerged yesterday more than 80 MPs have pledged their opposition to greater use of the Rosebank oil field, including Stella Creasy, Belle Ribeiro Addy, and Diane Abbott, and Dawn Butler, the putative London Mayor candidate. So whatever happens, by about this time next week, Andy Burnham will have started the process of disappointing his own side. And as we've said before, he will never be more popular or more powerful than he is this week before he takes up the cudgels in number 10.
The Jackdaw and Rosebank, those two fields for gas and oil exploration. I mean, one possible outcome I was hearing last night is that he will split the difference. He'll do one and not the other, and make the case that that one is more compliant with climate goals than both. As you say, it depends, I think, a lot who's in which role, and that will pretty much guide us on that. I'd be quite surprised if nothing happens at all on that North Sea oil and gas exploration. Let's see. Anyway, there seems to be confidence emanating from the Burnham team that they have agreed with announcements all ready to go in the first couple of weeks. And that they've been pretty successful, you have to say, in stopping this leaking. Where the system is a bit more nervy, I think, is on the detail of personnel and how it's going to plug in. It's fine to have a grid and keep your secrets, and I think they can feel justifiably a bit smug about that. But two officials with different domestic-facing departments, telling my colleague Andrew MacDonald playbook that talks haven't even yet taken place in their department, those access talks between political officials that need to happen. Now, we do know that Antonio Romeo is sitting down with the key leadership figures this week in the department. So maybe that's all coming on, but I think that's the intention, is to plug that into decisions that have already been made, essentially. My guess is that James Purnell, the incoming chief of staff, already very active, is keeping this close. He's alongside Andy Burnham a lot. You see them a lot together, their heads locked together, obviously exchanging confidence. There's one of Purnell's old colleagues at Flint Global, his old firm, saying he's happier than he's ever seen him, and that big role in number 10 is such a siren lure for a lot of the old Blair crowd, going back to the heart of power. But grafting this new world of Burnhamism onto the existing structures is quite tricky. And I wondered what you were picking up on that.
It is very striking. I think, again, it's this business that there is just a black box at the heart of what's going on. So there's a lot of uncertainty. As you say, James Purnell alongside Lou Haig are the two most senior people advising Andy Burnham. I've got one more name to add to the mix, long anticipated to be part of this, but he was working in the MOD for for basically the period of the by-election. And that's one Danny Coyne. He's a former aide to Lou Haig, to John Healey, and in fact, in the early days, to Sue Gray. He is now one of the people who's liaising with the existing cabinet teams about the kind of most immediate challenges that the Burnham government will face. And there's just this process of the Burnham team going round existing cabinet teams asking, what do we need to know? But then the existing cabinet team's getting almost nothing back in return, which I think is frustrating quite a lot of them, understandably, but inevitably, so long as nobody knows the jobs, that has to include closer allies. Although people that you thought might be sympathetic are worried that it's a bit of a mess inside this operation. Another name, ex-Makerfield MP Josh Simons, is down in Westminster doing policy, which is quite interesting. As we revealed last week, it seems that Sarah Brown is all but nailed on for the top communications job. There's talk that they're going to bring back a veteran of the Brown and Miliband and Corbyn and Starmer eras to do the political strategy job in number 10. And there's a smattering of think tank hopefuls kind of all around the edge of the operation. But, Anne, I think there is and has been, and this is interesting, an acknowledgement that there just simply aren't enough bodies to do a complete reset of every single political advisor at the top of government, right? And so some advisors in number 10, I'm told, were asked that if they wanted to stay on, they could let one of the existing staff members know, and they'll pass on their names. So it might be that some people survive Monday simply because trying to put this plane together mid-flight is just is proving so difficult.
That's really interesting. And also, of course, you've got quite a levers bill, haven't you, if everybody goes out of the door at the same time. Just a couple of thoughts on that. One, I think we will see a very beefed up number 10 operation, although James Pennell is keeping his cards pretty close. I think he's actually put some ideas have been inked in on structural changes, which is code for we think number 10 under Keir Starmer was a bit of a mess. And I think that is acknowledged even by some people who work there, overlapping roles, over concentration of power, very close, very tight to the Prime Minister, but other parts of it, particularly political strategy, operations and things, I think they think needed a reboot. So I think we'll see that. I think we see the role of Antonia Ramesh that keeps being mentioned to me. I mean, Antonia has never been power shy, put it that way. And in this particular situation with a change of Prime Minister, actually, if you're an ambitious, very senior civil servant, that really allows you to roll up your sleeves. So I think she's pitching in a lot to key decisions and how they should be implemented. And that's so interesting what you say, that some, perhaps more of the old team of special advisors might survive. Or I would say there's a difference between surviving and your influence being intact. And I think we will see influence move, even if some of the names on the name cards remain the same, at least in the transition.
Yeah, and quite a lot of them just simply won't want to, because there is still actually more bad blood that hasn't spilled out in public, but there is more bad blood that I was picking up yesterday than many people realise. There will be bad blood with our listeners. And if we talk for very much longer, as there are multiple alarms going off across this house, not all of them just designed to tell us to shut up, but some of them are designed to wake up children as well. So let's go and do that. And I will see you tomorrow for Wednesday's podcast. See you then.
See you tomorrow. Another big day at Westminster.
How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.